Welcome to the penultimate session, part 20 of 21. We've spent weeks breaking down the Declaration of Immunity.
Yeah, we're really nearing the finish line here.
We really are. And today, we're finally putting the pieces of the puzzle back together.
Right, because we've been looking at all these separate parts for so long.
Exactly. We've been looking at these fragments, right? Rules about warfare, treaties, hypocrisy, social conduct. But today, the goal is to see how these laws of economics, leadership, and psychology form one single, unbreakable system.
Yeah, and that's the key. It's a total system. You can't just pick and choose the parts you like and expect it to actually function.
So for you listening, if you've been on this intense journey with us through this ancient text, thank you. Today's where we step back and look at the fully operational operating system, so to speak.
I like that analogy. And the overarching concept tying all this code together is a term the source text calls Deen.
Which usually gets translated as religion, right?
It does, yeah, almost universally. And honestly, it's a pretty lazy translation.
Really? How so?
Well, because calling Deen a religion, at least in the modern sense of the word, is just a massive category error.
A category error. Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. I mean, today we think of religion as a private, personal thing. It's spiritual comfort. You go to a building once a week, you pray, you go home.
Right, it's compartmentalized.
Exactly. But the material we're unpacking today, mainly focusing on Surah 9 at Tawbah, verses 115 to 125, it makes it clear that Deen is a comprehensive, meticulously calibrated framework for all of human civilization.
So it's all or nothing.
Yeah, it functions all together or it collapses. The social obligations, the economics, the legal code, the personal spirituality, they're all interlocked gears in the same machine.
Okay, so if we're looking at this total system, where does it start? Because the sources seem to lay down a pretty strict prerequisite before the system can even judge anyone.
Right, and that starts with the rule of law. Verses 115 and 116 establish absolute transparency as, like, the non-negotiable baseline.
Transparency, like open source code.
Yeah, that's actually a great way to put it. The text states a fundamental legal principle. The divine system will never lead a people astray or punish them until it has made perfectly crystal clear to them what they need to avoid.
So God doesn't play gotcha.
Exactly. No hidden trapdoors in the legal code. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse, but, and this is a huge but, that's only true after the system has done everything possible to explain the law.
I mean, think about the modern implications of that.
Yeah.
The phrase, ignorance of the law is no excuse, is terrifying today.
Oh, absolutely, because our laws are intentionally opaque.
Right? I don't even read the terms and conditions on a software update because it's 60 pages of jargon.
Yeah, let alone a national tax code.
You could accidentally commit a felony just by filling out a form wrong. So the modern system is like a walled garden.
It is, and the sources point out this exact flaw. In our world, the law is so dense, it's basically the exclusive property of a highly specialized class.
Yeah, to hire a lawyer.
Right, and pay exorbitant fees, not necessarily to find the truth, but to twist or hide the law depending on who's paying them. Justice becomes dependent on capital.
So what's the alternative proposed in the Deen? How do they keep it open source?
Historically, early implementations of this system used figures known as muftis.
How were they different from, say, a modern defense attorney?
Well, their primary societal function wasn't to advocate for a paying client. Their job was to provide free, straightforward legal clarity to anyone who asked.
Wait, free? Completely free?
Yes, completely free of charge. A farmer or a governor could walk up, ask a question about a scenario, and the mufti would just tell them what the established law was.
That's a massive failsafe for access to information.
It was designed so no one could ever legitimately say, I just didn't know. You can't have a high-trust society if the rules are a secret.
But the text takes this transparency beyond just human courts, doesn't it? It applies to the universe itself.
Yeah, it does. The sources refer to this as sunnatullah, the established unbending laws of God.
So God operates through laws, not magic.
Exactly. The rise and fall of nations, economic collapse, societal success, it's all cause and effect. It's not whimsical magic tricks.
So if a society is fundamentally corrupt, it will collapse.
Yes. That's not a mystical curse, that's just the law. And the text warns that you can't violate these universal laws and expect to be magically saved just because you call yourself a friend of God.
Gravity doesn't care if you're a saint. If you jump off a cliff, you're going to fall.
That's it, exactly. The laws are impartial. They remove the safety net of exceptionalism.
Okay, so the system is perfectly clear. The laws are established. But what happens when that system faces an ultimate grueling stress test in the real world?
And that brings us right to the campaign of Tabuk, which is referenced in verse 117.
Right, the ultimate crucible. Set the scene for us. What year is this?
It's the year 9 AH, so the 9th year after the community established their new society. And they are facing an existential nightmare.
The Byzantine Empire, right? The Romans.
Yeah. The undisputed superpower of the 7th century, professional armies, heavy cavalry, and intelligence comes in that they're massing on the northern borders.
So the prophet issues a call for general mobilization. Every capable person has to march north to Tabuk.
But the timing, the environmental and economic realities make it almost an impossible ask.
It's the peak of summer.
The absolute peak. The heat is lethal, water is scarce, they barely have enough mounts, so men are taking turns walking in the blazing sand.
And the economic hit is just brutal. It's harvest season, isn't it?
Yeah, after a whole year of labor, their dates, which are their main staple and their economy, are finally ripe.
Their entire livelihood is just hanging in the trees.
And they are being commanded to turn their backs on it, leave it to rot, and march hundreds of miles into the desert.
This is why I love this deep dive. It's not just a military history lesson. It's a psychological audit of the society.
It forces a brutal binary choice. Individual survival or systemic survival. Will you abandon your personal security for the collective?
And what's wild is that the text is uncomfortably honest about their reaction. Verse 117 says the hearts of a faction of believers almost deviated.
They almost broke. The sheer terror, the heat, the thought of their families starving it, pushed them to the brink.
They wanted to quit.
It was a primal urge to just stay home and protect their immediate interests. But here's the profound part. God turned in mercy to them.
Not because they were fearless, but because they acted anyway.
Exactly. The system judges you on your ultimate action for the collective, not on the fleeting doubts and terrors inside your own head.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. By validating that fear, acknowledging that they almost quit, how does that make a community stronger?
Well, think about systems that demand robot-like perfection. If feeling fear is a crime, people just bury it. They mask it.
They become hypocrites.
Right. They posture right up until the pressure's too much, and then they completely shatter.
Because they spend all their energy pretending rather than dealing with the actual threat.
But the text says, I know you're terrified. That's biological. What integrates you into the system is acting despite that biology.
It creates a culture of honesty.
Yeah. When you're marching in that heat, you know the guy next to you is just as scared, but you're both moving forward. It builds an unbreakable bond.
But not everyone marched, and the system had to deal with the stragglers. This brings us to verse 118, which is just a staggering case study.
It really is. When the army gets back, there are dozens of men who stayed behind. Most of them were hypocrites.
The guys with the disease in their hearts. They come up with fake excuses, right?
Yeah, I was sick, my parents needed me, that sort of thing. And the leader superficially accepts it. He just lets them walk away.
They think they gamed the system. But then there are the 3 honest men.
Right. The sources focus heavily on Ka'b bin Malik. He was a wealthy, respected poet, and when he stands before the leader, he doesn't lie.
He admits he had no excuse at all. Perfect health, plenty of wealth. He just procrastinated.
He kept putting off packing his gear until the army was too far gone. He tells the absolute truth.
And because he was a genuine participant who just failed, he couldn't be waved off. The system had to process his failure. So what happens?
The prophet delays judgment and institutes a total, absolute social boycott against Ka'b and the other 2 honest men.
A 50-day boycott. I mean, imagine that. The text says the earth, despite its vastness, became straight and tight for them.
It's the linguistic equivalent of a panic attack. For 50 days, no one speaks a syllable to them.
Not even their friends.
Not their friends, not business partners. Eventually, even their wives are ordered to separate and go back to their families.
That is intense. To a modern ear, that sounds incredibly harsh. Why not just fine him or put him in jail for a month?
Because a fine is transactional. It says you can buy your way out of failing the community.
Ah, it turns duty into a commodity.
Exactly. And a physical prison just outsources the punishment. It removes you. But a boycott forces you to stay inside the society and feel the moral weight of what you did.
It relies on self-imposed discipline, accountability enforced by the community's shared values, not armed guards.
Right. And during this intense pressure cooker, Ka'b faces the ultimate temptation. He gets a letter from a neighboring Ghassanid king.
A proxy for the Byzantine Empire, the very enemy they just went to fight.
And the letter says, We hear your leader has abandoned you. You're a man of honor. Come to us. We'll give you wealth and respect.
It's the perfect exit strategy. A golden parachute from a competing system. How many people today would just defect?
Most people in the corporate or political world would take that deal in a heartbeat.
But Cobb doesn't.
No. He recognizes it as a test of loyalty. He walks over to an oven and throws the letter straight into the fire.
He burns it. That is incredible. Even when the system is actively crushing him, his allegiance is unbreakable.
He realized a profound truth. There is no refuge from God except in God. You can't escape the consequences by defecting to a lesser system.
And because he submitted without rebelling, he's finally forgiven. Verse 118 comes down, the 50 days are over, and he's reintegrated.
His harrowing honesty is validated. It permanently teaches the community that the system is built on truth, and truth requires immense endurance.
Which brings us to the core thesis of today's deep dive, this intense focus on community over the individual. Verse 119 explicitly defines the difference between religion and deen.
Yes. Verse 119 is a very short command. O you who have believed, fear God and be with the truthful.
The key word there being with.
Exactly, be with. If you look at traditional, individualistic religion, how do you achieve ultimate piety?
You isolate yourself. You go to a cave, a monastery, a yoga retreat. You focus on your personal inner peace and block out the noisy world.
Right. The ascetic in the cave is held up as a saint. But in the system of deen, that isolation is functionally a crime.
Wait, a crime?
Well, functionally, yes. You can't be righteous in a vacuum. The system requires you to be an active cog in the societal machine.
The commentary asks that devastating question. If you're meditating on a mountain while a flood destroys the valley, how many drowning people did you save?
Exactly. What good is your personal purity if you aren't helping anyone?
It's like working out in your garage every day just to look good in the mirror versus training with a team to win a championship.
That's a perfect analogy. Your personal fitness is useless if you refuse to show up for the game. The text demands integration.
But getting your hands dirty in the real world means you're going to get hurt. You'll face exhaustion and danger. How does the system handle that pain?
It pivots brilliantly. Verses 120 and 121 outline what we could call the economics of hardship.
The economics of hardship. I like that.
The system mathematically records every hardship endured for the collective good thirst, hunger, walking a dangerous path as a good deed.
It totally redefines what a good deed is. We usually think of charity or praying at night.
Right, soft things. But here, the physical and psychological endurance required to protect the community is the highest form of worship.
The thorns on the path turn into flowers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The system actively incentivizes enduring hardship. It tells you none of your pain is wasted, it's currency.
It turns hardship into a marketplace. The true participants actually rejoice when things get hard because they're buying paradise.
It's an intense bidding war. And strategically, think about what that does. If a society values comfort above all else, it surrenders the second things get painful.
The enemy just applies a little pressure and they fold.
But if a society views enduring hardship for a just cause as a triumph, how do you defeat them? You can't terrorize a population that sees suffering for their system as a badge of honor.
Wow. But there's a huge risk there, isn't there? If everyone is out fighting and enduring hardship, who's maintaining the intellectual integrity of the system?
If everyone is a warrior, who's doing the thinking?
Exactly. You'd end up with a brain drain.
And that is the exact vulnerability addressed in verse 122. It institutes the decentralization of knowledge.
It's a crucial safeguard. It commands that not everyone should go out to the battlefield.
Right. A specific group has to stay behind or travel to the center to acquire deep knowledge. The Arabic term is Tafaqquh al-Din.
Getting a profound understanding of the total system. And then what?
Then they have to return to their people to educate them. If a society only focuses on militarism and physical survival, it neglects its intellectual growth and collapses from the inside.
You forget why you're fighting in the first place.
Exactly. But the sources point out this is not a mandate for a priesthood. This is the anti-clergy clause.
Right. History is full of religious elites who hoard knowledge and wear special clothes and talk down to the masses.
The goal here is the exact opposite. It's a continuous democratic flow of information.
People come from the peripheries, learn at the center, and then take it back to the local trenches.
This ensures the transparent law we talked about earlier stays transparent. You can't have an open source manual if no one in the village can read the code.
That's brilliant risk management. But how do you stop the scholars from just staying in the capital, drinking coffee, and writing theoretical papers?
by linking their education directly to their communal responsibility. Their duty isn't fulfilled until they return and warn their own people. The knowledge has to be functional, not just theoretical.
It has to solve real-world problems. But you can't just be a society of scholars and farmers, right? You'd look weak to your neighbors.
Right, which leads to verses 123 to 125. The system requires a specific external posture: deterrence.
The command is to fight the nearest enemy and let them find harshness in you. And we really need to unpack harshness, because today that sounds like cruelty or barbarism.
The sources are very clear on this. Harshness here does not mean arbitrary violence or injustice against civilians.
It's not cruelty.
No, it means unyielding strength and absolute deterrence. The system has to project such an imposing aura that nearby threats are paralyzed by the mere thought of attacking.
It's the do not touch sign, backed by a high-voltage fence. Peace through strength.
Exactly. If empires like the Romans look across the border and see a soft, purely academic society, they will invade, they'll see prey.
But if they see an integrated, ideologically aligned society willing to endure anything, the cost of invasion is just too high.
And this redefines piety, or taqwa, once again. Pious doesn't mean being a weak, trembling ascetic who turns the other cheek until he's crushed.
True piety means being strong, brave, and capable of holding the line. Because you can't have a just society if you're conquered by a tyrant.
Exactly. So we have this massive, interdependent system, but how do you know who's truly integrated and who's just faking it?
The ultimate diagnostic tool, verses 124 and 125.
The litmus test. The text says that whenever a new, difficult command comes down, it instantly splits the community.
For the true believers, it actually increases their faith.
They're eager to execute the mission because it validates their purpose. It proves their integration.
But for the hypocrites, the people with the disease in their hearts looking for a frictionless life, the new command just increases their doubt.
It builds resentment. They look for loopholes. The system deliberately introduces stress, and your visceral reaction, excitement, or resentment tells you exactly where you stand.
It perfectly encapsulates everything today. Deen is not a passive identity on a census form. It's a total system.
It requires transparency, endurance, brutal honesty, decentralized knowledge, and unyielding strength.
You can't isolate yourself in a cave. You must be with the truthful. It leaves you with a really haunting thought for our modern lives.
How so?
Well, think about it. We live in a world obsessed with perfectly safe, frictionless, pain-free environments. We insulate ourselves from hardship.
We view any demand on our comfort as an infringement on our rights.
Exactly. But if the ancient text is right, if hypocrisy thrives when life is easy and is only burned away by the crucible of shared struggle, are we just designing societies that will shatter the moment a real Tafaqquh arrives?
Are we building resilient systems or just highly efficient systems of isolation?
There's something for you to deeply consider as you look at the systems you participate in today. What is your Tafaqquh? And who is standing next to you in the heat?
That's a powerful question to end on.
It is. Join us tomorrow for the final session. We'll be looking at the ultimate conclusion of Surah At-Tawbah and what it means for the future of humanity. You won't want to miss it.